Welcome to the Intentionists podcast, where we explore the interplay between intuition, spiritual health, and everything in between. I'm your host, Amy Schreiber.
And I'm Hilary Zwallen. Our intention is to create a dialogue that inspires you to consciously forge your path with curiosity and compassion for life and its mysteries. Welcome, fellow Intentionists. Today we are going to be talking about getting grounded to make the most of your summer. First, we're going to discuss the ways we can maximize the energetic quality of the summer and the myths that surround this time of year. And then we're going to talk about how our physical bodies can be influenced by the summertime and ways to be intentional about grounding yourself so you can be present and enjoy the next few months to the fullest.
Yes. Yay. And since summer solstice is coming up on June 21st, so a couple weeks. We wanted to discuss what is energetically happening this time of year, what people across the world do to celebrate. So for those who aren't familiar with the solstice, it's the time when the Earth's axis is tilted the closest or the furthest from the sun in the case of the winter. So in the summer solstice, it's the longest day of the year. And all around the world, people have celebrated different aspects of the summertime. So there's the more popular ones that I think people know about are Stonehenge.
Yeah. And again, this is the summer solstice is when it's closest in the northern hemisphere.
Right. Oh, yes. Thank you for clarifying that.
So the southern hemisphere where it's winter. So sorry if you're in Australia and you're listening, this may not apply. Maybe in December, right, for them.
Right. Yes. Thank you for clearing that up. Yeah. So Stonehenge, I don't know. Have you ever been to Stonehenge?
I have a few times. Yes, I've been there. It's a big stone circle, and I imagined it to be surrounded by like a tree forest, but it's kind of on a bluff, and it's basically just grass all around, and you can just walk up to it, and it's huge. They're massive stones. I mean, really incomprehensibly large. And when you think of like, how did people get them here 10,000 years ago? But yeah, it's just kind of in the Salisbury Plain in England. So yeah.
Yeah. Apparently, when on the summer solstice, when the sun rises and you're standing at this certain spot, it's rising right above this like outer stone. Exactly. I don't know. It's all aligned. I think that's the case at Machu Picchu too, with one of their temples there. There was, I don't know if it had to do. Oh yeah, Chichen Itza too, for sure. That's the big pyramid in Mexico that on the solstice, it's exactly cut in half by light and dark.
I think that's the same with the Pantheon. I know, like they were talking about the Pantheon, that there's this geometry that they set up where they, the sun, when it hits at a certain angle and the light filters through the circle at the top of the dome. And anyway, it was all lined up that these times of years have been extremely sacred and important for many different types of people. So it's interesting.
Right, it's
and
amazing.
I feel like in modern society, it's like we're completely disconnected from it. I mean, we're like, longest day of the year. And like the meteorologist gets on the local news and is like, you can stay out late tonight because it's going to be light. But like, we don't really think of it in terms of harvest. And I mean, I'm sure farmers do, but most of us who just go to the store and buy our food and we're really disconnected to the whole process. It's just, it's separate thing.
And we have our artificial lights, so it's not nearly like winter isn't nearly this dark time like it used to be when there wasn't electricity.
Right.
Yeah. It's been interesting learning about the cyclic nature of like the sun and the moon in the last few years, just because we're so disconnected, it's
right. So talk about fire rituals.
Yeah, so the summer solstice, it is a time that celebrates the fire element, and the sun is kind of the ultimate embodiment of this fire, this element. And so a lot of the rituals around the world involve big bonfires. People jump over the fire. In some places, they light this big wooden wheel filled with straw and stuff on fire and roll it down a steep hill into a lake. So there's like the dual celebration of fire and water at this time, because water becomes more important as it's going to get hot. Yeah. So there's always this idea, I think, that yes, we need to please the sun gods and we need to also appease the rain gods because this is our harvest time.
This is our harvest time, yeah.
Yeah, I was looking at all of the deities around the world, the solar deities. It was so interesting because if you think about it, like the sun was like the biggest item that could be seen in the sky, but it also moved around. Like its course was different. Right. It moved around the sky. Sometimes there was an eclipse. So people, I think, were very focused on let's do what we can to keep it on its predictable course. So that we, yeah. But anyways, do you want to talk about like the gathering?
So there's a festival in Wales called the Gathering Day where they take time to go gather medicinal plants. Midsummer's Night they believe the veil is thin between the worlds, the fairy magic, luscious magical beings. There's a whole Shakespearean play that's about it.
Yes. Yeah, so other traditions on this midsummer, it's said that women, if they sleep with certain flower, I don't remember what the flower was or how many, but like for these young ladies, you sleep with this flower under your pillow, you'll have a dream of your future husband. So things like that. And they say it's a really popular day to get married. It's a very like full, like you said, luscious time. Yes.
Yeah. It's peak abundance, right? So people want to get hitched astrologically. They can use all that energy to take into their marriage. And I wonder what I didn't know anything about this. So the day I picked for our wedding, I have no idea what the significance is on that.
I know. When were you guys married?
November 16th.
November. We were October.
Yeah. I love the fall, so I was fine with it. But I just wonder, it's not like some magical day that I know of, unless it is. So maybe that's our next.
Right. Maybe it is.
That's my next. Yes. Picking the right wedding day to have the most magic. I don't know. Yeah.
So I was looking at all these solar deities as I was preparing for this, and I always assumed that the sun god was masculine. I thought it was usually a masculine thing in most cultures. Mm-hmm. But I was looking at it, and there was almost as many female solar goddesses as male ones. I think a lot of them, probably at least 4 from different cultures, like Surya, the Hindu sun god, and Ra, the Egyptian sun god. I think Helios, too, from the Greek tradition. They all ride like a chariot across the sky. It's like they're driving because the sun travels. So I think in a lot of the mythology, it's a traveling god who has some sort of form of transportation.
Power. Yes.
Right. But I found the sun goddesses were really interesting. I found this one, this Japanese sun goddess from the Shinto religion, and her name is Amaterasu. But she was apparently created when her father, Izanagi, washed out his left eye in purification to like visit the underworld. Mm-hmm. And then he washed out his right eye, and her brother, the moon god, came out. So in this mythology, the moon is masculine and the sun is feminine, which is different than what I thought. So this moon god and her were ultimately married, but Amaterasu became furious when this moon god is Tsukuyomi. He killed the goddess of food, and so she got furious and banished him. So their separation is what created the day and the night in this story.
So they don't like each other, so they come out at different times.
Right. And so the emperors of Japan were said to be descended from this goddess, and she's associated with this sacred mirror, a sacred jewel, and a sword, which are enshrined today in different places of Japan.
Cool.
But yeah, I thought that was interesting. Amaterasu.
Very cool. I had never heard of that story before. Yeah, I always think it's interesting how kind of different cultures, how the gods and goddesses evolve, and who, you can kind of see a lot of the similarities and, differences as you really start to examine this stuff. It's like, you definitely see it with the Romans and the Greeks because it's so Rome just adopted the Greek tradition, but it goes even further back, and you can see it as it kind of spreads across humanity. Clearly, these types of myths have been important for humans for many millennia. So let's switch into appreciating and caring for your body and mind in the summer, and kind of using this energy. Amy and I were talking before we were live today, just about how this whole idea of being in line with the seasons and noticing how your body is influenced by it is a totally new concept. I mean, of course, going out when it's 95 degrees, you're like, oh, I need to get a t-shirt on and I got to drink a lot of water today. And you're kind of thinking in those terms, but not in the ways of, how does the cycle of the summer, how can I approach it in a way where, I'm giving myself the space to have downtime when I need to have downtime. How do I move in relation to the heat? I know you're in an extremely hot climate, Amy. Modesto is like
dripping sweat right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Modesto is going to be 102 today. So Modesto's hot too in the summer, but not with all the tropical humidity. So it's just like how to approach even just climate and have a reverence and respect for kind of the heat and the way we interact with that.
Right. Like working with the specific qualities or like gifts really of each season, like instead of working against them. I think in our culture, we're trained to just go, and never without ever stopping and adjusting for each season and its qualities. And I think this also applies to like the female monthly cycle. I was just reading this book, Love Your Lady Landscape by Lisa Lister.
Yes.
Amazing book. But she talks about the cyclic nature of one, our bodies, and then the greater world around us with the seasons, like the moon, shorter term, and then like the 4 seasons throughout the whole year. It all has like a major impact. There are different things that become apparent. Like the energy of each time lends itself to doing different things well,
right,
and other things become more difficult.
And don't you notice, I notice for myself there's like negative self-talk, right? I think most of us have it. And there's times where you're like, why am I not so productive? Why is it harder for me to have more output right now? And I never seem to think of it being like, well, maybe it's really hot outside and this is this time of year where, it's time to slow it down a little bit. Or maybe where am I at in my monthly cycle? Like that's a perfect example. This idea that we're just we expect ourselves, to just continue to just power through. And there's no ritualizing the actual natural flow of our bodies and the elements. We're completely disconnected to that as a Western society, I would say. At least I have been. Right.
I was so excited by this book too, because she talked about getting to know your body in like this very appreciative and sensual way that is like appreciating it for what it can do in each time that it is, especially like throughout the phase of motherhood, even like if you're a young woman and then you're a mother and then you're going through menopause. So all these cycles that happen, I think that especially during the summertime, people become more aware of their bodies, but it's not in an appreciative way. It's like a stress, like, oh, swimsuit season, what am I going to do?
Yeah, I need to lose weight. I'm going to be out in public and all this nonsense. Yes, I hear you.
Right. So she just had so much great wisdom for like approaching your body from this appreciative way that's working with it instead of against it, know? And I thought it was great. She had said in it that the summertime is associated, again, like we said, with the fire element, but the phase of the menstrual cycle that it corresponds to is ovulation. And then for those of you familiar with the kind of triple goddess archetype with this maiden, mother, and crone, the phase of that it's the creator mother phase. The sun is in its fullness, the earth is in its fullness. So yeah, I like that book. I would recommend it to every woman.
Yeah.
And man, if they want to learn.
Yeah, if they want to understand the women in their lives.
Right.
Yes, it's not a bad thing. I totally get that though, Amy. I just even reading her other book, Amy and I are like geeking out on this author, Lisa Lister. And Yeah, she's got some great stuff to say, and just bringing this whole idea of shame and releasing shame around just these things that make us inherently women. I mean, that all women have, menstrual cycles and really just this idea of like being hyper aware of basically every day of the cycle and what you're able to do. And then if you juxtapose that with the year, if we're looking at like 365 days as like a full cycle of the body, and of time, that maybe it's important to approach the time where there's certain times of the cycle where you need to be a little more dormant. And then there's other times where you can have more energy. So summer, again, fullness, brightness. Let's talk about, you had this meditation. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, this is a great exercise that I found in this book called The Healing Wheel by Mayana Welty. And she gives this exercise that is a practice of expanding your edges. So what that means is you're sitting in meditation and you're trying to feel and visualize the energy that is in you, the energy that surrounds you, and then practice expanding it, like growing it bigger, and then just noticing how that feels. And then she recommends to also do this in public and see how you feel and how people respond to you when you're in this state of bigness, and using this energy to kind of shine at people. And then to notice like them in their expansion, them shining back at you. So it's kind of just like this bringing awareness to the expansion of your energy during this time and consciously learning how to do that and what it feels like. And then the reflection that she gives for this is asking yourself, or journaling, whatever you want to do, how does your expansion benefit those around you? And are there ways that you keep yourself small or encourage others to be small that is outdated or doesn't serve? So just kind of being hyper aware of ways you keep yourself boxed in when you could be expanding, and how it can benefit. Because I think so many of us are afraid to grow bigger, for whatever, like many different weird fears and reasons are under that. But yeah,
For
so
sure.
I thought that was a great activity.
I was thinking too, when you were talking about that idea of kind of noticing where you're keeping yourself small and where you're shining out. It's a great way of like keeping inventory with these moon cycles, right? So if we're talking and seasonal cycles. So for example, I had a group of friends come over and we did our little full moon, intention setting. It was great. I mean, I loved it. I want to do it every month, but I thought it was so great to have women together, and we mostly just visited, and then we wrote down kind of what we wanted to release, like what's been bothering us, what's been, just kind of taking an inventory of like how we're being in the world. What are ways that are the way we're approaching life? How is that limiting us? How is it affecting our inner world? What are we carrying physically in our bodies? And and then we just wrote it down and burned it in the fire. And then it was really cool to just sit there as the papers were burning. I mean, you could feel like a physical feeling in your body of this stuff moving. And I think, maybe it's confirmation bias. I mean, I'm always open to the fact that it might be confirmation bias, but gosh, it's so tangible. So once we had released that, then we wrote down our intentions for this month. And it was more of a quality of the beingness, not goals. Right. I think there's an important distinction when you're working with the energy of a time. And we were talking moon cycle, but I was thinking this is a great activity to do at the beginning of the summer, like start on the summer solstice and do this for the next either you could do it for the half year because of, summer to winter solstice, or it could be until the equinox, that 3-month time, and really approach the beingness aspect. So how do I want to approach the world? Do I want to be... Is this a time where I'm moving inward and I'm caring for myself a little bit more? Am I being more gentle? Is this a time where I want to, really connect more with other people? I had set mine for this moon cycle as one of connectivity with women. And it was cool to see what kind of came up in meditation in that moment, because when I was going in, I'm always very like, this is what I want to accomplish this next 6 months or this next month. And it was really like what came up for me when I was setting those intentions was really this idea of, I really want to foster connectedness with other women and pay more attention to how my physical body is every day during a cycle, and how I can interact with nature and be present during the day, because I'm checked out a lot. You know, I'm always thinking of other stuff. Yeah. So it's a practice, right? Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a great exercise and contemplation to do. I think that especially your specific one you chose about connecting with women, that's a thing that I think is really big for women everywhere, because I think we all have this weird thing in our, like, weird women issues as far as like forming women friendships, feeling female rivalry. Like,
we've been like socialized to be competitive because of the way that the male structure is set up. It's just, you know, it's been that way for millennia.
Yeah, something so powerful about being in a group of women with you, doing whatever, your ritual, or just hanging out, like
in a space of intentional support, right? Like that was what was really fun. Is like when we put it together, it was like, okay, we're coming here and we're all holding space for each other, and it was just this really beautiful time. I mean, I loved it. I left feeling so full, and I think the other women did too. And it was this really cool thing that I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this more often.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yes, we are back now. We had to take a little bit of a one-day break in the middle of this, and Hilary is now in Florida.
That's right. Technical difficulties. And now we're going to talk about vacationing in an intentional way. And it's very relevant because I'm on vacation now. I'm in Florida.
Yes.
Hooray.
Yes.
So let's talk about creating time to unwind and escaping in an intentional way. So often we plan and we forget to be present. And I'm even, as we're recording this, I'm thinking, I've just kind of been in a fog because we had crazy travel plans yesterday where I got up at like 1:30 in the morning and drove to the San Francisco International Airport. And there was even traffic in the middle of the night. And it was just one of those, like, I was alone with my kids. They did great. But, you know, you're kind of like in a fog all day. So today's like the first day that I'm like, we should get grounded. I should really arrive in the space that we are here. I mean, how often do we not really arrive to the places we go, right?
Right. Well, especially if you have a really densely packed vacation, as far as like, okay, what's the next thing? We're going to have to emotionally prepare for this next step of it instead of just kind of sitting and not being so hurried. But yeah, yes. It's a tough one.
So what I mean by arrive, and I'll just, for our listeners' sake, I'm talking about setting aside time each day to ground yourself, to breathe, to notice the quality of your energy, of the nature's energy around you, of the energy in the new place that you're in, because everywhere you go, there's a different energy there. And so you don't get really carried away in the whirlwind of just kind of buzzing around in the stress of travel. And you really consciously choose to either connect or disconnect, whether it be to your electronics, whether it be to the location that you're in. So that's what it's like a good note. It's a reminder for me. I'm like, when we're done with this, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to ground. So.
Right. Well, and instead, I think like anytime I hear, okay, you got to sit and do this, this, and this, all these steps, it's like, that's just one more thing. So instead of thinking of it like, one more thing to schedule in your busy day or your vacation that's supposed to be relaxing, just take the time like right when you wake up or right before you go to bed or every time you eat. You know, this doesn't have to be this like extra big thing to be concerned with, but just like when you remember to do it, just sit and check in and see how you feel.
I find that I've been doing that more often just in general in my life. Like, and it does bring you so much more joy because you're actually experiencing the present moment in a way that's like, let me just pay attention to what's actually happening in this moment, because I live so much of my life in my head and just kind of disconnected and thinking about things and stressing about things. And so actually, noticing, like sitting down at the beach and putting my feet in the sand and actually like for a moment, just thinking, what does it actually feel like to put my feet in the sand? And the breeze. oh, how does that feel on my skin? And just doing that mindfulness check-in and just doing it more as it shows up rather than being like, at 4 o'clock, I'm going to ground, you know?
Right. Right. Yeah. Even as I was compiling some notes the other night and I was thinking about, oh, let's check in. I took like 2 deep breaths and I realized like, oh, I'm like, my shoulders are up to my ears. My whole body is tense right now. And just those 2 breaths really made a big difference in my feelings for the next little while. So any little bit it can be super helpful.
Yes. If you can view it though, in a way where it's not just like one more thing to do. Or just anytime you think about it, like if you start to notice like, oh, I'm so stressed, let me just take a second and like, why am I so stressed? You know, I know for me,
Right.
a big stress trigger is kids when they're like whining, right? I feel like I just completely disconnect from my body when my kids are like having a freak out and you're like, stop it. What's going on? You know? And I think those are the moments where it would really serve me to be like, okay, let's just take a breath here. What's actually happening? Do I need to respond with anger or frustration, or can I just let them have their moment of tantrum and then talk to them in a normal voice? You know, can be a life lesson, a reminder for me.
Yeah, no, that is the challenge.
Yes. The other part of the intentional vacationing is to intentionally plan your downtime and do it guilt-free.
Yeah, I think that's a big one.
Right?
Not even just on vacation, in life in general. I know I took 2 naps in 1 day last week, and I
Lovely.
tried really hard not to feel bad about it. I mean, I kind of did, but I did it anyway, and I think it was a good choice.
Right. To just say, you know what, this is my time at the 30 minutes right now. I'm not going to feel bad that I'm laying down on the bed and resting my eyes rather than being productive or, you know, doing things that I think I should be doing. Right. To just know that on vacation, it's like, oh, this is my day. I'm away from the stresses of life. I'm not going to get wrapped up in that. In what needs to be done in planning the itinerary. So it's like, we've got to get to the jet skis or whatever it is that you've got that can,
Right.
you know, it's like we can approach our downtime in a very stressful way if we want to. So
Right. So it becomes this balance of going with the flow of the energy. What is the energy of the day, the week, the month lending itself to? And then also like taking the time to insert your needed self-care. Because in the summertime, it's easy to get carried away, like you were saying. I think in this full bloom, kind of wild, fruitful time of summer, the not forcing things and letting your action or your productivity be an expression of your own integrity in the moment is what kind of the challenge and the goal is, at least for me this summer. I found this really cool quote in this Tao Te Ching book. Number 52 it says, all in the universe derive from the primal integrity. The interaction of yin and yang shapes and nourishes them, and evolution ever transforms them in their endless ecological dance. Therefore, in its own way, every entity celebrates its primal mother, not out of any mandate, not out of any obligation, but solely as the expression of its own integrity.
Oh, I like that. That's a nice one. Nice thought. Yeah, I like that idea that all of our interactions can be an expression of the mother, the primal mother. I'm all into the primal mother these days.
Right. It really comes down to like authenticity, like doing what is going to flow authentically and naturally from you.
Yes. And I think the whole idea too is just that in this time, in this season, this isn't the time of planting. This is the time of growth, right? So the time to sit down and like think and intend and like plan for the year is like springtime, right? It's that to really think about, what do I want to put into motion? Because now things are moving and growing and it's hot outside, and hopefully we're kind of moving in the direction of growth and allowing. I like that. The summer is for allowing, right? The fall is the harvest, the winter's reflection. I like that, really moving with the seasons. So this is also a great time because we're looking at, like you were saying earlier, with the summer solstice coming up on the 21st, to really get clear about what you want to honor in your life for the next 3 months. So things to contemplate. What are you willing to surrender? What belief systems are operating or running you that are not helpful? So what are you willing to put down and say, I'm just going to shed this right now. I'm not going to carry it along. Maybe it's negative self-talk. Maybe it's stress. Maybe it's like, I want to get out of this relationship with this person, or I'm willing to let some friendships that aren't really in my best interest fall by the wayside. Maybe it's work commitments. Maybe it's lightening your load and saying, I'm not going to carry so much stress. What are you willing to honor? And what are you willing to honor in saying, this is the part where you can get really intentional about, I want to honor, something I was thinking about was like when we did this little moon circle that I had mentioned earlier in the episode, really was about creating space with women and creating really, like, my hope was that for the next 3 months, I really wanted to create connection and connectivity and be really present to my connectivity with other women. I feel like that's something that I haven't been super intentional about over the last few years. And so rather than feeling guilty about it, I'm just thinking that's a missing, and that's something that I really want to create and to move into. So that's what I'm working on honoring. So it can be anything from like that. Is there anything you're thinking of, Aimee, that...
No, nothing in particular at this point. I need to do some reflecting, clearly. But I was thinking more like along the lines of the energetic quality, since this is the season of like things are in movement already. The seeds you planted are now growing. It's easier to see what you have planted. And so to see those things that you want to keep growing, and the things that you're like, that thing is manifesting that I don't actually want. Like, let me get rid of that.
Let's pull that weed.
Weed our garden. Yes.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the shape? How would you shape your energetic life? And so the idea with when you're looking at manifesting or getting clear about what you want to honor, rather than this isn't necessarily goal setting. It's not like 5 days a week, I'm going to work out, and this I'm going to, blah, 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 which goal setting is fine. But that's, to me, it's like a very masculine way about going through life. And it can be very effective. And I'm not saying like you shouldn't goal set, but the difference here is it's more of an embodiment. It's more about like, what is the quality of life you want to embody? Like, I'm trying to let things flow more instead of forcing things. So I'm trying to approach everything that I'm doing right now creatively from a place of allowing and nurturing, and showing up every day. Because if you don't show up, then nothing's going to happen. But if it's not coming, if it's not flowing, then I'm just, maybe it's a research day, or maybe it's, I'm just trying to like move more with the time, with what is showing up for me on the daily. So I don't know if that's making sense to our listeners or not, but
no, that does. And I really like what you said about how you wanted to foster this connection with women. And instead of feeling guilty, like, and beating yourself up about like not having, like, about that lack, you're like, oh, this is just my new thing that I want to try to do. I think, how many times do we come up against something that's like, oh, we want to change this, and instead of actually just changing it guilt-free, sit and wallow in this weird pity and like non-movement. So I think that was a good illustration of the perfect.
Well, and I think it's finding that balance of like how, as women, we tend to, like, I think, let's say if we're talking qualities or goal setting, right? And we're talking like I was saying, I want to embody this. I want to create this space for women. So I'm always torn between the desire of like what my selfish wants are, which, like, wouldn't it be cool to have like a really awesome community of women that I love? But then also with this altruism of like, I really want to make a difference in the world. How can I make a difference in a small way? And I think, by setting the intention of, I want to just be open to creating deeper connections with women, that everyone gets to win with that. Like, I win. And
right, because then you will have that community.
Yeah, and if I'm just going into my circumstances or my interactions with women with my eyes open and with knowing that that's the intention that I'm honoring, then those that want to have a deeper connection are going to start showing up in my space more. And I've seen that happening even already. Like, the minute I started creating that goal, it was like, sorry. The minute I started creating
it's okay. Goal isn't a bad word.
Yes, I know. But I'm like trying to be all like significant and saying, here's the difference. Yeah. Right. And here I am. So yes. So moving along, the other questions to ask in terms of like how you want to honor the next 3 months is what quality do you want your summer to have? We've kind of been talking about that. And then just taking a moment to really visualize the memories you want to make, how you want the relationships to go, the friendships you'd like to make or reconnect with, the experiences you want to share and with whom you want to share them. How, if you've got children, you know, how do you visualize your experience and the quality and the memories that you want to make with your kids this summer? And really just taking 10, 15 minutes and kind of meditating on, here's how I want my summer to show up. These are the memories I want to carry with me. And then how do I move into that space with that in mind, rather than just letting the barrage of like camps and play dates and work commitments and all of those just kind of take you over, right?
Right. No, those are super important questions. I really need to do this. I feel like I've been on pause for the last little bit because we're changing apartments this week. So I've been like in moving, and then I feel weird too because Lincoln, my son, doesn't even get out of school for a whole nother month.
Oh, wow.
So it's this different experience. Yeah. So I'm trying to like be flexible with understanding, okay, what is summer like here? Like what is going to, like, what can I focus on that's going to maximize this time? And yeah, it's a new experience, but yeah, those are some great reflections to,
you bring up a really interesting point, right? Because perhaps some of our listeners are in a place where they're either doing year-round school or they're homeschooling or they're in Mexico or in foreign countries where the system is different,
or they have no kids.
Or they have no kids. Exactly. But just that summer, it has a lot of times we have, because of our previous experience, we have these ideas of how it should be or how it should look. And so when it starts to show up differently, there's resistance, right? And so how do you move into it? I think you brought up a great point of asking yourself, oh, how do I want the summer to look, and how is it different, and how is that going to be okay? And, you know, moving into it consciously, knowing that you'll probably experience less resistance by being in a space of allowing, rather than being like, well, this isn't the way that it was.
Barreling through.
Or like being mad that it's not what you're used to. Right. Yeah.
Flexibility, always a good thing. I remember that's funny that you mentioned about how we're raised in the United States with this 3-month summer vacation. And then suddenly you become an adult and you're like, wait, I don't get a summer break anymore. I remember being like sad and jarred by that idea. And when I talk to like older teenagers, they're like, wait, I don't have this rest. Like, when do we rest?
And you're like, oh, you don't get to unless you create your life to do it. Yeah, you have to be really conscious about it.
Right.
So then if you're working full time and you don't have kids, then how do you allow the rest to come in? And you can. I really believe that there are ways to do that, but it may not be where you get to leave for a month at a time, or that you get to leave for a week. It might just mean that you take an hour at the end of your day and really decompress.
Right. So adapting it all to your situation.
Yes. So the final question I was thinking is just, what is the quality that you want your spiritual practice to take on this summer? Sometimes this is adjusted because of travel or kids or work or personal experiences. And I think that, knowing how I was raised, there was a lot of cultural pressure on like reading your scriptures and praying and like doing it every day and feeling guilt if you didn't do it every day. And so I've really had to like consciously shed that whole idea and going like, you know, so what is going to work for my spiritual life during the summer? Because it's probably going to look a little bit different than it did in the fall when my kids are in a predictable schedule. And I know that I have my days are scheduled out in a certain way. And really the idea of how can I take a moment to connect with the divine in a way that is meaningful and that can work for my life, where I'm not feeling the guilt if it's not like an everyday occurrence. Or how can I bring it in every day, right? These are just questions of what is going to work for you.
Right. Yeah, I was experiencing, like last month, for example, I felt like I was super good about like meditating in the morning and in the evening. Then I do yoga during the day. I was reading lots of good books that I wanted to read. So I was like, man, I got my whole system down and it's going to be this way forever. But then like a couple of weeks ago hits and I'm like, I haven't done anything. And even one of the books I've been reading laid out this very regimented system for training your mind, basically, like practicing all these things. So I'm like, dude, I'm going to be a ninja by the end of this. And it was very masculine, very rigid, very, very methodical. But then right when I was like about to kind of embark on it, I hit this part where I was like, I need to get in touch with my emotions and do this more flowy feminine thing to where I am just honoring myself. And so I like just cried on my yoga mat for like a half an hour a day for the next week. And it was just like totally different, totally not what I thought I would be doing. But yeah, sometimes you just gotta flow with it and understand that your spiritual practice is going to shift and evolve with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like that. And I always like to clarify because you and I love to talk in terms of masculine, feminine. And it's not when we say to do things less masculinely, it's not like a rip on men, right? It's like the idea is that we've lived in a very masculine society for thousands of years now. And this loss loss of celebration around these feminine qualities have kind of been they haven't been as celebrated. And the idea is to have a full balanced approach and seeing, maybe you're.
Yes. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we probably need to say it like every episode, because I think you and I understand our thoughts on it. Like, yeah, it's not totally about male versus female. It's the idea is this. It's like you said earlier. It's the yin and the yang, and it's trying to find ways. And maybe you're the person that lives in your feminine energy a lot, and you're kind of Mother Earth, and you're a lot more fluid with your emotions, and you're not as structured. And so then maybe bringing in masculine qualities would be really helpful for you, right? It's kind of learning to know yourself and saying, for me, I feel like I've always been like hyper motivated, really focused and driven and to my detriment in some ways. And so for me, really consciously focusing on allowing and bringing in those quote unquote feminine qualities are really how I see me living a long and sustainable life in a healthy way. Like I have to do it for my survival, but it's kind of for each of us understanding where our strengths and our weaknesses are and bringing that back to that place.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about the balance and it's about the wholeness. Like not one set of aspects are better than the other. They're not even, everyone has all of them. They've just been like labeled in these different ways. Right. But yes, that's an important clarification to make.
So I would say for a little challenge before we part, to take a minute, if you're listening to this, if you're in a place where you can write something down, to just write out, what are you willing to surrender this summer? What are you willing to honor this summer? And what is the quality that you want your summer to have? And then just write it out, and you can either throw it in the fire, or you can just set it up on your mirror if that works better for you. Take a moment and meditate and visualize all of that coming into your body, releasing what isn't working for you. And then send us an email and tell us how it went, if that works for you. We'd love to hear from you guys. Intentionists@gmail.com is how you can connect with us, or you can find us on Instagram and Facebook. So at Intentionists with an S.
Yes. So enjoy your summer, everyone. Hope it is blooming nicely for you. Before we part, we'd like to say thanks for listening, and we hope you'll connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We would love to hear from you and appreciate all feedback, shares, and likes.
To learn more and subscribe to our newsletter, visit Intentionists.com. And no matter where you are or what you're creating, we send you love and invite you to breathe and begin.
See you next week.